Hello and good evening. Welcome to the Bloody Binge podcast presents Shivers. This is going to be our first episode for the paranormal. Um, Today we are doing Colonial Williamsburg and the paranormal stories that go along with it. Uh, for those who don't know, Colonial Williamsburg, we're going to do the history of that when we get there and that, but it's a large historical, almost like a campus, but it's not really a campus, area in Williamsburg, Virginia, where um, that's basically still. I'm trying to think of the words to say. Um, it's been preserved and it's been remodeled and restored to still be a colony, pre-American Revolution, when the British were still running the colonies. Uh, It is a very beautiful area. Everybody walks around in period dress. Um, they do reenactments. They fire the cannons and fire muskets and things like that. They have reenactments where George Washington will come and make speeches, and Thomas Jefferson and many other of our founding fathers. It's one of my favorite. Was one of my favorite places to visit when I lived in Virginia, especially if I was having a really bad day and needed to get away from a few things. I would just make a 45-minute drive north up 64, to Williamsburg, and just hang out. You can have dinner there. You can go shopping there. There is a the Virginia Peanut Company is a wonderful shop to visit if you ever get a chance to go to Colonial Williamsburg, um, because they give free samples. So you can just go in and snack on peanuts for a while, peanuts, candy, and things like that. That they all have samples of for everything. So definitely, if you get a chance to visit, I always suggest visit Colonial Williamsburg. It's beautiful. And if you like theme parks, Busch Gardens is right around the corner. Um, as is Water Country USA, the local water park. And it's funny because when you're in the wave pool of Water Country USA, you can hear the muskets and you can hear the cannons going off at Colonial Williamsburg. But first thing I want to do tonight before we start any diving into Colonial Williamsburg is I'm gonna try some. It was a little really hard to find some of these, but we're gonna do some I guess weird paranormal news. Basically some weird, crazy news stories. The first of which is the Vatican has tightened the rules on supernatural phenomena. This is from the BBC. Winter reports of a weeping statue fake news. How credible is the claim that a holy relic led to a miraculous healing? And how should a divine apparition be confirmed? These are the themes addressed in the Vatican's new guidelines on supernatural phenomena, which urge the Catholic Church to take a more cautious approach. The document, compiled by the Vatican's, of course, I didn't read this word, dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, lays out stricter rules to assess the truthfulness of such claims. The new guidance was presented at a media briefing on Friday and replaces rulings last set out in the year I was born, 1978. The document recommends incidents of phenomena should be carefully addressed to make sure that they are not fraudulent or an attempt to make money. The paper warns against creating damage to the unity of the church and serious errors that could cause scandals and undermine the credibility of the church. So basically, once again, the Catholic Church is worried about how they look at the end of the day, and not, investigating truths or anything like that. Reports of such phenomena are said to have soared in recent years in an era of social media, sometimes spread through disinformation and rumor. The new guidelines say that as a rule, bishops should issue a. I do not speak Latin. I was raised Roman Catholic and I do not speak Latin. Nihil obstat, nihil obstat, or no obstacle in such cases. This means that the incident would not be formally recognized as supernatural, but there would be no barrier to worship. Supernatural recognition by the Vatican is rare. The document goes on to say that 5 other decisions can also be issued by bishops, including rejecting the event as a supernatural altogether, or even banning the worship of some phenomena. Under the new rules, Vatican approval should always be sought by bishops before any conclusions are published, with the Pope able to intervene in exceptional cases. Apparitions have been reported across the centuries. Those recognized by the Church have prompted pilgrims and popes to visit spots where they are said to have taken place. Millions flock to Lourdes in France, for example, or Fatima in Portugal, where the Virgin Mary is alleged to have appeared to children, promising a miracle, after which crowds are said to have witnessed the sun zigzagging across the sky. The visitation was officially recognized by the church in 1930, but other reports have been found by church officials to be baloney. It literally says baloney in the article, guys. It literally says baloney in the article from the BBC. In 2016, an Italian woman began claiming regular apparitions of Jesus and Mary in a small town north of Rome after she brought back a statue from that is a Medjugorje in Bosnia, where the Virgin Mary is said to have appeared, is also said to appear because the Virgin Mary gets around. Crowds prayed before the statue and received messages including warnings against same-sex marriage and abortion. Coincidence, and and it's just a coincidence that those are two really, big hot topics right now. So yeah, it took 8 years for the local bishop to debunk the story. The shrine was not mentioned in the new guidance. The new rulings say many pilgrimage sites linked to supposed phenomena have not received authentication from the Vatican, but this does not pose problems for the church. And so the Vatican, an institution peppered with mysticism and which still communicates via smoke signals when electing a new pope, will be hoping its new rules can regulate claims of the supernatural. So yeah, it basically, from the sounds of it, these new rules are designed to protect the church, protect the church's image. Um, I'm not a religious person at all, and it's not that I don't believe in God. It's more along the lines of I don't believe in an organized religion. Um, but being raised Catholic, it was always image. The image of what people thought, what people outside of our family thought of us, what people outside of our friend circle thought of us, and growing up like that it kind of sucked. But now in an art, basically they come out and flat out said in this statement that yeah, we're more worried about. They don't really say it in so many words, but they're like we're more worried about the way people see the church than actually investigating and discovering, and proving the paranormal that something could be supernatural. Um, so yeah, so basically, if you see something and you think it's religious or you think it's supernatural, keep it to yourself. I guess that's what the church is saying. Because most of the time they're not. They're just gonna tell you to fuck right off. So here's a funny one. An Indiana judge rules that tacos and burritos are actually sandwiches. A judge in Indiana thinks that basically said has ruled that tacos and burritos are sandwiches. The ruling stems from a legal battle that started in 2022 when Martin Quintana, a developer, unveiled plans to open his restaurant, the famous Taco Mexican Grill, on a strip mall in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The Allen County Planning Commission rejected his bid to open the eatery, citing a written commitment that Quintana had accepted. And again, I'm probably butchering this name. I apologize. I am not very good with reading names. I'll just tell you that right now. All right, According to the agreement, with a local condo association, only alcohol-free restaurants that did not allow outdoor seating and only sold made-to-order or Subway-style sandwiches were allowed to open at the location. Basically, you're only allowed to open a sandwich shop in the strip mall. Was the rule from I guess the zoning. The agreement was put in place to keep some national fast food chains from opening at the strip mall, according to court documents obtained by NBC affiliate WPTA. Okay, what national fast food chains don't serve sandwiches? Because a hamburger is technically a sandwich. Subways are sandwiches. Like, who are you trying to keep out that doesn't serve sandwich? KFC serves sandwiches. Arby's serves sandwiches. Like, who are you keeping out? But after 2 years of legal battles, Judge Craig Bobe Bobe from the Allen County Superior Court ruled Quintana's original plans would be permissible based on the original commitment. In his opinion, Bobe ruled that Famous Taco Restaurant is permissible under the terms of the original written commitment, and agreeing with Quintana that tacos and burritos are Mexican style sandwiches, and the original written commitment does not restrict potential restaurants to only American cuisine style sandwiches. Bobe said the commission can't appeal the ruling. I mean that's every court. You could always appeal any court ruling. So yeah. So what are your thoughts, guys? Do you think are tacos and burritos sandwiches? I mean, yeah, kinda. And let's see this one right here. This is a short one right here. So, a New Orleans police superintendent, Ann Kirkpatrick, told city council members on March 13th that rats had infested the department's building so thoroughly that they made their way into the evidence room and were eating confiscated marijuana. They're all high, she said, according to the Associated Press. The uncleanliness is off the charts. She elaborated, saying the building is full of mold and cockroaches, and staff suffer broken air conditioning and elevators. Like, that's the whole story. Basically, the rats are getting high in New Orleans. Um, that's fucking hilarious. And how honest, that's hilarious. And finally, our last piece of news, because it's gonna be a decent show talking about there's so much going on in Colonial Williamsburg paranormal wise that we're gonna need most of the hour or hour and a half. Um, Bobby Mackey's. I don't know if anybody heard about this. I don't know how many people follow Bobby Mackey's. Bobby Mackey's was made famous, God, almost 20 years ago now. Um, on the show Ghost Adventures. Um, it is one of the most haunted places they visited. It is a place that, after their second visit, I believe, or it was either the second visit or I think it was one of their tours that they did that they hosted. Um, one of their events that they hosted at Bobby Mackey's. Um, that shit went down so bad that the Ghost Adventures crew themselves, Zach Bagans, Aaron Goodwin at least. I don't know if Nick still follows it, but I think Nick was part of it. They all decided they do not want to go back into that building. None of them want to go back into the building. Aaron Goodwin blames the building for his divorce. Zach said that there was something that happened between him and another person. If I remember right, I can't remember the whole story. It's been a long time since I've read about it, but I think something happened where it got a little too personal for Zach. Um, and he decided not they all decided they will never go into that building. Well, now they don't have to worry about it because Bobby Mackey's is getting demolished. Um, Bobby Mackey's Music World, often dubbed America's most haunted nightclub, plans to demolish its storied building this summer. The Wilder, Kentucky venue will move to the former location of Mugby's Biker Bar and Restaurant in Florence, with a soft opening set for Friday. So I guess it's already open. Its original location will likely be demolished by the end of the summer, promotion manager RJ Seifert told the Inquirer. Seifert said owners Bobby and Denise Mackey plan to renovate the 46-year-old honky tonk bar. After conversations with the engineering contractor, the couple learned it would be too expensive to salvage the site. They plan to rebuild a new one-story bar on the land of the original location by 2026, but the date is subject to change. Just really outdated, and it's been there over 100 years. And the plumbing, and the roof, and the furnaces, all the mechanical systems are just ancient. Seifert said. Let's see. Don't care about the mechanical bull. Basically, they're moving the mechanical bull. Um, Gatekeeper Paranormal, the paranormal investigating group that runs the Bobby Mackey ghost tours, will continue to offer guided tours at the original location until May or June, according to Seifert. So basically, you have until about the end of this month or next month to go if you are ever wanted to go see um, Bobby Mackey's. This is your time. This is it. You have to go now, or you're never going to get to see it. Ghost tours are slated to resume at the future Bobby Mackey's Music World Bar in Wilder. However, tours at the new location will primarily focus on the portal to hell or the large hole where handyman Carl Lawson is rumored to have dug up the journal of a pregnant singer named Joanna. Johanna. They spelled Joanna. They spelled it Joanna, but her name is actually Johanna. Um, I have the song downloaded. I love the song. Um, who allegedly killed herself via poison after her father murdered her lover and hung him in the dressing room. Seifert said Mackey plans to install plexiglass around the well, similar to a bank teller's window, so customers can still view the attraction. The infamous concrete wall, dubbed the Wall of Faces, that features water stains resembling human faces, will also be preserved for the new location. So it sounds like what they're going to do is they're going to move to another location until they can tear this bar down and build a new one. Um, although I don't, if you tear something down that's paranormal, it's normally doesn't end well. I had a friend who told me. I remember one time she was telling me stories about um sure her place was haunted. She'd hear the toilet flushing by itself and things like that, and that she had gotten that she had found a um God, I can't remember the holy beads. I gotta see this is that put me on the spot on this one. I can't think. Um, but they're the holy beads that you hold, the prayer beads that you hold to pray. Um, and she was going to destroy them, and I said, if you wanted to get a lot friggin' worse, that's what's gonna happen. Um, I don't. She never did tell me if she did it or not. But before there was Bobby Mackey's, the grounds were home to a 19th century slaughterhouse, which was later torn down. In the 1930s, entrepreneur Buck Brady opened a nightclub on the land called the Primrose Club, which was supposedly taken over and run by the mob. The nightclub was renamed the Latin Quarter and eventually shut down in the 50s before reopening as the Hard Rock. After the Hard Rock closed in the 70s, country singer and Kentucky native Bobby Mackey opened Bobby Mackey's Music World in 1978, as it remains to this day. So hopefully they can do something and get Bobby Mackey's going correctly, because that would be a shame. That would be a downright shame if they closed Bobby Mackey's. That or they will or the it's definitely a very. I've never been there. It's a very haunted. Um, it's a very haunted location. Um, and if you believe in demons, there's definitely a place you may want to visit. So let's go. Let me open my window, my bookmarks. All right, so Colonial Williamsburg. That's the end of this. That's the end of news and everything right now. We're gonna start talking about Colonial Williamsburg. Um, as I said early in the show, it used to be my runaway place. Um, Sorry, I'm looking at something. Um, it used to be my runaway place. I would run, like if I was having a bad day, if my depression was kicking in or anything like that, I could just go out to Colonial Williamsburg anytime, day or night, and just walk around for a little bit, and I would start feeling better. Um, it was only a 45-minute drive from Virginia Beach, and it's always open. The grounds themselves are always open. You have to pay to go inside the buildings, but you can always walk the grounds. People do still live in the historical area. Certain houses are off limits. They have big old signs outside that say private residence. Um, and just the feel walking around, it's a different environment. A lot of places I this is actually where I got started with ghost hunting and paranormal investigating. Um, did I miss a story? No, I didn't miss a story. That was from a couple weeks ago. Sorry. Um, they it's like I said, it's such a wonderful place. The shops, the food. Um, when you go there, like I said, if you go during the day, everybody is normally, everybody who works there is in period piece, in what they would wear back in the colonial days. They don't have redcoats walking around for most weekends, but they do have like American Revolution, Revolutionary soldiers who didn't really have uniforms. Um, they walk around. Um, they do the reenactments. They'll fire the muskets. They'll fire the cannons. You can actually make reservations because you actually have to make reservations because it's very popular to eat in some of the old original inns and restaurants there. And when you go to eat at these locations, it is just like you were eating. They were just like they were eating. The recipes are the same from back in the 1700s. You eat by candlelight, and you basically don't really get a choice of what you eat. You go in and they serve you what they have. Um, And it's a very wonderful experience, again, especially if you're big into history. I am a history buff, and that was one of the positive things when I lived in Virginia. Um, in my area, there's a lot of history. We had First Landing State Park, um, where the Pilgrims or the colonists first arrived. They first walked on land before they got back in the boat, sailed up the bay, sailed up the river, James River, and landed at Jamestown. We have Yorktown, which is where the American Revolutionary War ended. We have a couple of battle sites for the Civil War. Um, and Richmond ain't that isn't that far away. We have Fort Monroe, which is like one of the original forts in America. It's where they have the Casemate Museum, which you can go and visit for free. That is in Newport, right. That's right across the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel when you're going west. You're actually driving north, but it's 64 west. It's weird. It's a weird interstate where the interstate is east and west, but you're actually driving north and south. Um, because you really can't drive east because if you drive east, you're going into the ocean, um, or the bay. But it's just a very, in the case, but back to Fort Monroe real quick. In the Casemate Museum is where they actually have the casemate, the cell that Jefferson Davis was kept in when they after the Civil War was ended. Um, and not only that, we were like a really close drive to Washington D.C., which again is one of my favorite cities to visit and to hang out in. Mainly because I grew up going there a lot. And then in my 20s and 30s, I'd make a weekend to go hang out up there and go to bars and that. But Colonial Williamsburg. Let's get to we're going to talk about the history of the area first, and then we'll move on to the hauntings. Hold on one second. Sorry, guys. Just had to take a sip of drink real quick. So basically, Colonial Williamsburg is the restored and reconstructed historic area of Williamsburg, Virginia, a small city between New York and James Rivers that was founded in 1632. It was designated the capital of the English colonies in 1698 and bestowed with a royal charter in 1722. Excuse me one second, guys. Got a cough. Again, sorry. It was the center of political activity before the and during the American Revolution, where George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Patrick Henry debated taxes, slavery, and the inalienable rights of men, and has since become the site of an ambitious restoration project launched in the 1930s and funded largely by the family of John D. Rockefeller Jr. With many of its historical structures rebuilt and with interpreters reenacting 18th century life, Colonial Williamsburg has become a landmark in the history of the American preservation movement. More than that, though, the project serves as a self conscious shrine of American ideals. The history and legacy of slavery, once downplayed at Williamsburg, is now dealt with openly. Interpreters are both white and African American, but the focus remains on what the site's originators called helpful information about democracy, freedom, and representative government. That's basically just like a really quick rundown of the history. Colonial Williamsburg was the brainchild of a man named the Reverend William Archer Rutherford Goodwin. He actually was named W.A.R. Goodwin. Once rector of the historic Bruton Parish Church. And here's the thing: the Bruton Parish Church um, was one of the first buildings. I think it was like the second or third building built back in the 1600s. It's still open today. It still functions um, as a I think it's a Methodist church. Um, so you can still go on Sundays and worship at the Bruton Parish in Colonial Williamsburg, and it's been updated, of course, in that it's it's got modern. I haven't actually been inside, so I couldn't tell you whether it's how modern it really is or not. But um it's not like those like little churches. Like if you go to Dollywood, you can go. They actually have service at Dolly's old church, like little cabin, little shack church that like 30 people can sit in. Now you can sit a bunch of people into the building. As a matter of fact, I don't have many stories about the Bruton Parish. There's really not many hauntings in the Bruton Parish, but see if that works. That's the Bruton Parish there. Um, to the left over here, you see the graveyards. Um, to the left of the steeple there. Um, and like I said, you can go into it anytime you really want. Got another pretty one. There's the Bruton Parish at night. Uh, you can go visit it anytime. Um, but again, you have to pay to get in. I think except for Sundays when anybody's welcome to come in and worship. Um, so yeah. All right. Basically, he was the rector. He was the reverend of the church of the Bruton Parish Church in Waynesburg. Goodwin had been responsible for raising funds for its restoration in 1907. In 1924, he approached the philanthropist and oil tycoon John D. Rockefeller Jr. with the idea of restoring the other parts of the town. Rockefeller agreed, and with cloak and dagger secrecy, began purchasing rundown properties using Goodwin as his agent. The two communicated in coded telegrams lest locals discover the plan and hike their prices. Authorized purchase of another antique referred to in your long letter, Rockefeller wrote to Goodwin at one point, signing off as David's father. The historian Henry Weintek has noted the astonishment of Williamsburg citizens when they found that the illustrious Rockefeller was the eminence behind these purchases. Official planning for Colonial Williamsburg began in 1926, and the town was informed of the project in June of 1928. Their objections were minimal, although one town person memorably chafed at the idea of being in the position of a butterfly pinned to a card in a glass cabinet. Restoration eventually encompassed 85% of Williamsburg's original 18th century area, with more than 700 buildings that postdated 1790 being demolished. The site stretches across 300 acres. Rockefeller, Goodwin, and their associates described the new Colonial Williamsburg as a shrine of history and beauty that would be dedicated to the lives of the nation's builders. There will be windows built here, they declared, through which men may look down the vistas of the past. Their vision stressed the importance of the democratic ideal, promoting an almost religious message that only heightened patriotic feeling, but was also the main educational purpose behind the project's conception. Yet many aspects of the social history, most notably of the role of African Americans, were not fully explored until the 1970s and 1980s. When Colonial Williamsburg first opened to the public, slavery was diminished, and enslaved people were referred to as servants, and black historical interpreters were absent. African American interpreters first portrayed enslaved laborers in 1979. Missing as well was an informed understanding of the role of women that women played in the 18th century town. With its emphasis on wealthy white men, early colonial Williamsburg presented a point of view that many modern historians would regard as severely limited. Rockefeller's historical vision, steeped as it was in sentimental patriotism and nostalgia for better times, was typical of its day. Unsettling economic and social change ten, following World War One tended to elicit strong expressions of national identity among Americans, Colonial Williamsburg serving as but one of them. So basically, we're not going to go through all this history, but um, yeah, basically you can thank Rockefeller and W.A.R. Goodwin for what Colonial Williamsburg is today. Also, basically at the very west part of Colonial Williamsburg I think it's Duke of Gloucester Street is the main road in Colonial Williamsburg. The College of William and Mary, which is the second largest or second oldest college in America, second only to Harvard. Um, and many of our founding fathers studied there. Thomas Jefferson studied there, uh, and many others, like a lot of others did. So basically, I'll just go through the brief timeline real quick that we have. In 1632, the city of Williamsburg is founded between the York and James Rivers. 1699, it's dedicated as the capital of the English colony. 1722, Williamsburg is bestowed with a royal charter. Then we skip 200 years, all the way to 1924, where Reverend William Archer Rutherford Goodwin approaches philanthropist and oil tycoon John Rockefeller Jr. to procure funds for the restoration of Colonial Williamsburg. 1926, the planning begins. 1928, residents of Williamsburg are informed of official planning for Colonial Williamsburg and the project's financing through John D. Rockefeller Jr. himself. 1976, Colonial Williamsburg celebrates the nation's bicentennial year. Due to lower than expected attendance, the following year would mark a change to incorporate an updated and more socially oriented version of colonial history, allowing for elaboration on the position of marginalized parties under the leadership of historian Carrie Carson. In 1988, slave cabins are reconstructed at Carter's Grove, an 18th century plantation about 5 miles outside of Williamsburg. I'll tell you, I've never been to Carter's Grove. I didn't even know that thing existed until I just read that right there. Because to me, Colonial Williamsburg is basically Duke of Gloucester Street right there. You can go a couple blocks. You have like the nation's first mental hospital, and things like that. But this is where I am. Um, so let's get started. Let's go ahead and start at the very western part. We'll go ahead and start with let's see, bring up my file. We'll go ahead and we will start with the College of William and Mary. Sorry, I've got like so many windows open. Bookmark. We'll start with the. Oh, no, 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 no. Stay on page. Don't want to go there, but I almost cut you guys off. We'll start with the Wren building, um, which is the main building. If you walk, like I said, if you are walking down Duke of Gloucester Street towards the College of William and Mary, you'll have to cross a main intersection there, which is relatively easy to do, even though it's very populated with traffic. You cannot drive down Duke of Gloucester Street. It is blocked off, and it is a dirt road. Um, the one thing you'll also notice about Colonial Williamsburg is a lot of these paths are covered with a white rock or a white shell. They are shells. They're clam shells. And it's an amazing thing because at night they glow. They don't really like glow, but they are illuminated. Like the rocks, the shells themselves are illuminated because they're pure white, and you can clearly see pathways between grass and everything like that. It's a weird, awesome, awesome um thing. So basically, we're gonna go to if you're walking across, you're gonna come to three buildings. To the left is the Bramerton House, or the Brafferton House. To the right is the president's house, and then straight in front of you, the biggest building is the Wren building. It's almost got like a steeple on top, and that the Wren building was chartered on February 8th, 1693 by King William III and Queen Mary II of England, and it was intended to act as a grammar school, or in more modern terms, middle to high school equivalent for adolescent boys. It was also set to be a philosophy school, aka a college, and a divinity school. 6 months later, workers laid the building's first brick. The Wren was first built by English contractor Thomas Hadley in what then known as Middle Plantation, which became Williamsburg in 1699. Originally, the building was set to be a square or rectangle structure with an open quadrangle at its center, but this construction was never completed as the construction team ran out of money mid-project. The completed building housed all activities of the new college with classrooms, a library, faculty room, and living spaces for the president, faculty, staff, and students. In addition to a school for Native Americans, we will talk about that in a minute. Um, because that is a really really big part of the paranormal stories in um, on college on William the grounds the campus of William and Mary is the Native Americans. Um, the Virginia from 1700 to 1704, the Virginia General Assembly used the building while the state capitol was under construction. The building was first dubbed the college, and later the main building. It was renamed in 1931 for Sir Christopher Wren, a British architect. This, despite Wren, the royal architect at the time, being the building's namesake, it remains dubious of how much of the building he personally designed. The weird thing is, it actually burned down during the Civil War, and they had to rebuild it a few years later. So we don't need to go to the namesake. Here we go. On the night of a string of fires, on the night of October 29th, 1705, the Wren building burst into flames near the personal quarters of the college's first president, Reverend James Blair. The accidental fire raged into the morning and damaged most of the building's west walls, but no one was injured or slain. This fire was the first of a series that befell the building. In December of 1781, a small fire burned a significant section of the building. Around 2 to 3 a.m. on February 8th, 1859, Another fire blazed, this time starting in the building's chemical laboratory. I always say laboratory. I don't know. I think it's from watching Dexter's Laboratory, but I always say laboratory. Uh, there it is. The fire decimated the library and chapel. Then president of the college and pivotal figure in William and Mary history, Benjamin Ewell, rescued students trapped on the third floor. Per an archival newspaper article from the time, there was no fire engine in Williamsburg worthy of the name, making controlling the fire spread that much more difficult. The last fire was in 1862 when a group of Pennsylvania cavalrymen with the 5th Pennsylvania Cavalry set the building on fire because it once housed Confederate troops. Aside from that territorial legacy, the cavalrymen also wanted to prevent Confederate snipers from continuing to hide in its upper floors, which, if you see the building now, it would definitely be a spot if you're in war for snipers to sit. This fire severely scorched the building. Union soldiers also gutted other buildings on campus, and the remaining walls of the Wren became part of the Union line of defense, adding insult to injury for the Confederacy. Um, Also, during the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, it did become a wartime hospital, field hospital, and barracks. In the Revolution, during the Battle of Yorktown, uh, and for months after, the Wren was chiefly a French hospital, but also served American soldiers. In the Civil War, the Confederacy first used the building for housing and hospitalization. Confederate troops used Brigadier General Jubal Early, or Confederate troops under Brigadier General Jubal Early camped at the Wren before the Battle of Williamsburg. The Confederate hold on the building was followed by the Union, which overtook the campus and city in 1862. So, with all that, there is some paranormal activity in the Wren building. Um, it's really hard to find the like full on ghost stories for Colonial Williamsburg because are a ton of tours um, that charge money to go. I even got the Wren building. Hold on, let's put the Wren building up. That's the Wren building there. Um, they charge money to go on tours, of course, and it's like $20, $30 depending on how long of a tour you get. And they're very informative. You cannot go. There's very few that'll take you inside the buildings. Um, there are a couple, but there's not many that have permission to do so. Because you do need permission, of course, from the historic society to go inside the buildings. But because of its involvement in the war, there are many murmurings about who may reside within the Wren's hallowed halls. Though the building is filled with the living class as classes, official events, church services, weddings, museum expedition are still held inside. The Wren building is also thought to be filled with the dead, both above and below the building's foundations. There's been reports of ghosts of soldiers who perished in the hospital are said to dwell in the building. Typically, the Revolutionary War soldiers. Although, given the building's history, it is also probable that some of these apparitions are from the Civil War, as these ghosts are commonly heard in eerie footsteps that echo through the building more than they are seen. Few have few have been able to look closely at the grounds for identifying uniforms or regalia. Because let's face it, if you see a ghost, you're gonna get scared out of your mind, and you are going to not look. Um, Ghostly legends are embedded in the culture and tradition of William and Mary, the college. Uh, the College of William and Mary is actually what we called it back home, but from a statue that is said to grant good grades to students to a bridge that either rewards loyal collegiate sweethearts or curses them. Some students have seen ghosts in the Wren, including one described as a soldier patrolling. He roams the third floor near a room known to be where a soldier died from injuries sustained during the Revolutionary War. Some have noted that this soldier seems to visit students attempting all nighters. Whether or not his presence is a good or bad omen for exams depends on the student. Um, in my opinion, in my experience, something like that would be what you would call, I God, the words the words escape me. A recurring haunting, I guess, a recurring. Basically, I think hauntings are of two things. It's either memories um that are embedded in a building, or they are uh people who have not crossed over, I guess you could say. Um, to me, it's more that seems more like just a recurring, like memory that just recurs over and over. There's a lot of those hauntings out there, but um, that's what that one seems like. Also, Sir Christopher Wren is also rumored to pace the building on foot as if to appreciate his purported design, his footsteps faintly reverberating through its versed walls, which I don't know about that one because again, it's burned down so many times. Unless he, sorry, making sure I was still recording. Um, unless he's the guy that they really no information on here at least about who the last person to um design the building was. Um, but yeah, it could have. I mean, it could be. I could be wrong. No examination of the Wren building is complete without confronting what it's at its foundations. So, in early 1729, contractor Henry Carey Jr. built the Wren Chapel. Below it, he built a crypt. This crypt became the resting place of Governor Bodator, Sir John Randolph, Peyton Randolph, which we will learn a lot about Peyton Randolph here in a minute. He has one of the most um he has one of the he basically his name is on the most haunted building in Colonial Williamsburg. So we will be talking about him in a minute. Um but he's buried there and a host of other remarkable Virginians. However, this resting place has not been wholly peaceful. In the Civil War, when Union forces seized the city and the William and Mary campus, the Wren was ravaged. In addition to burning the Wren itself, Union soldiers looted the crypt, robbing silver and other precious items from the coffins. The litany of ghosts that are frequently spotted on the campus may very well originate from these burial vaults, because we all know that if you steal from a ghost, it's gonna piss them off. So yeah, and perhaps they stir from the vaults to simply retrieve what has been taken from them. But it is entirely probable that some ghosts seek revenge, however possible, on the Yankee soldiers who defiled their resting places. So that is the Wren. The Wren building, like I said, it's pretty haunted. But we're gonna move on to one of the more disturbing, not really, I guess, really disturbing tales, disturbing buildings on campus, the Brafferton. Like I said, if you're facing straight, if you're facing the Wren building, to your right is the president's house, and to the left is the building you see here, the Brafferton house. Um, the Brafferton house housed it's the most today it houses the offices, and I believe that's where the president of the university stays. Is in the Brafferton house, and and I'm trying to find my where. So I got to find my notes on the Brafferton house because this is. Did I just cut it off? I didn't cut it off. Did I? Did I? Whew. Thought I cut you guys off there for a second. Um. So employing his authority we're gonna learn about the Brapperton real quick. Employing his authority as the commissary of the Bishop of London in the colony of Virginia, the Reverend James Blair worked tirelessly to seek the approval for the founding of a college in this country. Blair's efforts on both sides of the Atlantic were successful in obtaining funding and a royal charter for an Anglican college in Virginia, which would be named for the English monarchs King William and Queen Mary. Blair also garnered funding from the estate of scientist Robert Boyle, which were used to purchase the Brapperton Manor in Yorkshire, England, in 1695. The Boyle charity purchased the Brapperton Manor for, I believe that's pounds, £5,400, a significant sum of money in the 17th century. What is it? So basically, um, so I don't know why you would. Is this from this William and Mary like website itself? So I guess they brought it over. Name for the Brapperton. Okay, they named it for the Brapperton Manor in Yorkshire. The Indian school. It says Indian on here. Why does it say Indian? Would carry the name of its primary funding source and be known as the Brapperton Indian School. Funding the school and filling the school with native students were separate challenges. Shortly after charting of William and Mary, colonial officials would encourage the tribes who were signatories to treaty agreements, also known as treaty Indians or tributaries, to send some of their young men to the college. Like, guys, this is on the William and Mary website. They're calling them Indians, not me. An enslavement and servitude, Native communities experienced fear and mistrust regarding the safety of their community members. Tribal leaders, even among those who negotiated treaties with the English, were reluctant to bring their young males to the colonial capital. The request to bring Indian boys to Williamsburg for instruction at the new school was met with silence and inaction. Basically, what they did. I'm not going to keep reading all this because this is just going on and on and on. It's kind of droning. Um, when they would when they would fight the tribes and stuff like that, they would take the boys, and the hope would be to bring them, lodge them in the Brapperton house and educate them and teach them how to basically be English. So they can send them back to their tribes, and they can um, kind of serve as a missionary uh, for the white Englishmen to the Native American tribes. Um, they locked them in. They trapped them in this. But they really lock them or trap them, but they weren't allowed to leave or anything. Every time they tried to leave, they'd get stopped. Um, okay, here we go. That's the president's house. Sorry, I'm trying to get to my ghost stories here because um. So what are the ghost stories? Basically, the first Indian massacre was in 1622, and it killed about one third of the colonial population. The plans for opening a college were canceled. Once William and Mary was finally chartered in 1693, the charter contained a section that said the college would also operate as a school for Indian boys, to train them to be Christian ministers and to show them the virtues of English culture, so that when they returned to their tribes, they would serve as missionaries to convert the Indians to the English way of life, preventing any further wars or helping the English expand their territory more rapidly. However, this plan did not work well. You think? You think it didn't work well? Yeah. The college could not get any volunteers for their school until 1707, when 6 boys were taken as prisoners of war from a warring tribe and given to the colony as tribute. This first class stayed with local residents in town, much like a foreign exchange student program. But many students were abused by their colonial guests and died of disease. Many of the boys did not speak the same language, and they would start getting into fights as they were from warring tribes. To create a better atmosphere for the students, a dedicated house for the boys was built in 1723 after a wealthy donor in England left a large sum for the school's operation in his will. That house became the Brapperton House, also known as the Indian School. The boys would sleep on the second and third floors, but were still catching diseases from colonists. Many of them escaped to return to their tribes. Many escaped to return to their tribes in an attempt to be cured or healed. In response, the college barred the doors so the boys could not escape, and as a result, many Indian boys died inside the building. At times, would come up to the step. Students would come up to the steps to sit, and from behind them, they would hear the doorknob turn. They would also basically that I guess they went straight into the haunting. Um, there's a lot of hauntings going on here. Basically, the president and his wife. Like I said, that's where the president of the university lives and his wife. Um, they there's been rumor like they've heard grown men weeping and they ghostly weeping. They've seen young Indian boys walking around. But one of the saddest tales and I guess they were also heard like tom toms beating in the building. But one of the saddest tales from the Brapperton is the story of the running Indian boy. Um, Basically, this young man figured out a way to get out. He would climb down from the second story of the building, uh, and just go running at night. He would strip his clothes off and go running, yeah, through the sunken garden, through the ground, basically the grounds of the college, and then he would come back um, before the morning, before the people showed up to escort him to class and everything like that, before he could be discovered that he had left and went running. Um, well, unfortunately, one night the boy never returned. Um, Nobody knows what happened. Some say he was, you know, killed by a wild animal. Maybe a band of very bad people could have done it. The official story, for some reason, I've never heard this before. Every ghost story I've been on, every piece of history I've ever looked at, never said this. But I guess the official story was that he just dropped dead, like just dropped dead, nothing. Um, but to this day, there's rumors that they see on the grounds of College of William Mary, they see the young boy running, um, just running, like running around, being free. It's a very sad, like I said, very sad story. Um, so a visiting professor who once stayed on the top floor of the Brafferton for a semester remarked that twice during his stay he awakened in the middle of the night by the sounds of footsteps and a tom tom drum beating in the room with him as he laid in bed petrified with fear. I read that. Okay. So yeah, that's the Brafferton. Um, I don't have a picture of the president's house. But the Brafferton, yeah, it's a weird story. But we're gonna go right across the lawn to the right side. Um, because again, if you're looking at the Wren building, on the left is the Brafferton, to the right is the president's house. There's not really much. I don't have much history in the president's house. But there is some weird stuff that goes on there. Um, if you walk the Palace Green towards Merchant, okay, we already did all that. The foundations of the brick Georgian mansion, which also is also an exact replica of okay, that is the Brapperton house. What the hell? They got these backwards. Um, Basically, the president's house was commandeered for military use during the American Revolution. It had been occupied without interruption by the president of the college. However, the years of military tendency has left a bizarre legacy. A 20th century repairman found the remains of a skeleton, possibly that of a soldier from revolutionary times, hidden away in the attic. Many residents have complained of hearing of disembodied voices at night, always in the same area on the stairs between the second and third floor. No one has determined the origin of the bones, discovered in a crawl space above the third floor ceiling, but L.B. Taylor Jr., author of Ghosts of Williamsburg, reported that the skeleton was pressed into a brick wall, suggestive of inhumane treatment. After the skeleton was removed, the wife of the then college president informed Taylor it was possible for the first time in generations to get a cantankerous. Basically, it was the first time in generations to get a door that wouldn't work on the third floor to remain closed. Before that, it would open on its own accord. The skeleton was not the only vestige of war. The place seems to host an 18th century French soldier, possibly a hangover from the time when the building was served as a hospital during the final weeks of the Revolutionary War, as French and American troops sought to outmaneuver the British at nearby Yorktown. General Lafayette used the president's house as a shelter for the wounded. The French were forced to evacuate in 1781 because of an accidental fire, the damage from which was afterward repaired during a 4-year project financed by France. Unfortunately, the work did not remove all the traces of those who suffered within the walls, and for generations, families and servants have heard the footsteps of what they believe to be the spirit of a French soldier who died in the small back room, making his way up a creaky staircase. So, yeah, the president's house on the all three buildings in that main area all have something going on inside of them. Um, and a lot of it's unexplained, but that I mean to me it proves my theory the whole like they found the skeleton and now they can open that door. So moving on, let's go down the street. We're gonna walk down Duke of Gloucester Street for probably about half a mile, maybe a quarter of a mile, I think about half a mile. Past the Bruton Parish Church, to the left, we're going to take a little stroll down the Palace Green to the Wythe House. The Wythe House itself has a very unique history. Um, and it has one of the most unique tales and most famous ghosts in Colonial Williamsburg. Um, Let me get to my notes. I know I got to plan these better. The Wythe House once belonged to George Wythe's father-in-law, Richard Taliaferro. The house was constructed between 1752 and 1754 and was conceived as a whole with no additions made to the rectangular two-story structure. The house was built during a period of time when the governor's palace was being renovated. The house remained as the sole household of Taliaferro when his daughter Elizabeth married George Wythe in 1755. The couple received the house as a wedding present from Taliaferro, and they received a life tenancy upon his death in 1779. Elizabeth lived there until her death in 1787, and George moved to Richmond, Virginia in 1791 to serve as a judge. The house served as headquarters for General George Washington from September 14th to 17th and 22nd to 28th in 1781, prior to the siege of Yorktown. The house has saw several subsequent owners, and in 1926, the Reverend Dr. W.A.R. Goodwin, rector of adjoining Bruton Parish, established the offices of the second floor after the parish acquired the building for church use. Dr. Goodwin is known as the father of Colonial Williamsburg. We already talked about him. George Wythe was let's learn about George Wythe though. George Wythe, and it's spelled Wythe, which is with. I promise you, it's with. Even the city, he's got a city named after him, Withville, Virginia, is With. Was an American academic, scholar, and judge who was one of the founding fathers of the United States. He was one of the first of the seven. He was the first of the seven signatories of the United States Declaration of Independence from Virginia. With served as one of Virginia's representatives to the Continental Congress and the Philadelphia Convention, and served on a committee that established the convention's rules and procedures. He left the convention before signing the United States Constitution to tend to his dying wife. He was elected to the Virginia Ratifying Convention and helped ensure that his home state ratified the Constitution. With taught and was a mentor to Thomas Jefferson, John Marshall, and Henry Clay, and other men who became American leaders. So, where's the haunting, you ask? So, one of the things is you can't. It's really hard to find the story for this. Um, Tell you what, there is the George Wythe house. Um, yeah, it is a very, very hard to get accurate accounts of things, but we're going to talk about the most famous spirit in Colonial Williamsburg, Lady Anne Skipwith. If you stick around until the witching hour, it is said that the midnight silence may be violently broken by a strange, unwieldy thumping noise on the stairs. Straining your ears against the stillness, you might recognize the sound of a hampered footstep in the night. Others have told strange tales of a ghostly female clad in a beautiful colonial dress that looks at herself in the mirror before vanishing from sight. Occasionally, the smells of an unknown woman's perfume lingers lazily in the air. So why, you ask? During the 1780s, Lady Anne and her husband, Sir Peyton Skipwith, would stay with George and Elizabeth in the Wythe house when they would visit Williamsburg. They were really good friends of the Wythes. During these visits, they would regularly be invited to the governor's mansions for parties and for balls. Lady Anne was a very hot-tempered, angry woman, especially when it came to her husband, who she was violently jealous. When she got very jealous when he would talk to other women. One woman in particular was Lady Anne's own sister, Jean, who was rumored to be having an affair with Peyton. But one night they were at a ball. Everyone's having blast. Lady Anne was having a delightful time, laughing and dancing, when she witnessed something that just made her blood boil with rage. Without a word, Lady Anne took off from the governor's mansion, running down the palace green towards the Wythe house. In the process, she lost one of her red shoes. When she entered the house, the servants told authorities that suddenly all was the sound they heard the sound of footsteps, but only one step was wearing a shoe, so it would make a clomp thump sound. Lady Anne entered the home wet and muddy and slowly climbed to the top of the stairs. The entire time, the only things the servants could hear below was clomp, bump, clomp, bump of the one shoed Lady Anne climbing up the stairs. Once Lady Anne reached the top of the stairs, Lady Anne climbed on the railing and threw herself off, killing herself instantly. What did she see that made her so angry? Of course, there's no official record of what she saw, but according to historical record, Sir Peyton married Lady Anne's sister Jean shortly after her death. Could Lady Anne have seen Peyton and Jean wrapped in each other's arms? Did the revelation cause Lady Anne to flee in the rage and sadness? We may never know the answer. However, there is a legend, and the legend says if during the evening hours you walk up to the door of the With house and you say the words Lady Anne Skipwith, Lady Anne Skipwith, Lady Anne Skipwith, I have found your shoe, that she will appear in the top right window, but inside you can hear the thump, clomp, thump, clomp of just one shoe on the wooden floors. That itself is a very creepy, creepy story. However, there is really no proof that this story happened. We do know that she did run from the mansion. She did lose her shoe, and all that happened. However, there is no actual evidence of her killing herself that night because, according to some historical records, Lady Anne would die during childbirth about a year or so later. However, it is still 100% true, 100% fact, and documented that Sir Peyton Skipwith did marry Lady Jean just months after Lady Anne Skipwith died. But Lady Anne is not the only ghost said to haunt the With house because there's also a rumor that George With himself might be there. In 1806, when George Wythe was nearly 80 years of age, he was poisoned by his greedy grandnephew, George Sweeney, who was the primary beneficiary in Wythe's will. Sweeney was deep in gambling debt and nearing financial ruin, and thought that he could solve his financial problems by killing his elderly great uncle by poisoning his cereal. However, the plot was foiled by one of Wythe's enslaved workers, Lydia, who witnessed the treacherous act. Wythe died a slow and painful death over 2 weeks in Richmond, but his last act was to remove Sweeney from his will. Although Sweeney was charged with murder, Lydia, the only witness, could not testify against them because slaves were not permitted to testify in court. Although Wythe did not die in his house, many believe that his spirit remains in his Williamsburg home, angry over the injustice of having been robbed of life. It is said that he returns to visit each year on June 8th, the day of his death. Guests sleeping in his room report feeling a firm and cold hand pressed down on their foreheads. That is the stories surrounding the George Wythe house. And it's a beautiful house. You get an eerie feeling staring at it when you're there. And um, what is this building? Okay, I know what building that is. Sorry, I had to take a look at that building real quick. That's actually we're gonna go there here in a minute. That's the Peyton Randolph house, but I forgot to label it in here. So we're going to leave the George Wythe house, and we're going to actually go down to the eastern side of Colonial Williamsburg to another famous building, one of the most popular buildings in the in the on the campus. The public jail. I should get a better picture. There's the better picture of the jail right there. Hold on one second, guys. Ugh, had to wet the whistle real quick. So basically, the public jail is a two-cell brick prison located in Colonial Williamsburg. The jail was built in 1701 to hold runaway slaves and convicts scheduled for branding, hanging, and other forms of punishment. Several famous criminals spent time in the public jail. And here's the thing, they spell jail Gaol. But 15 henchmen from pirate Blackbeard's crew were sent to jail in 1718, and Henry Hairbuyer Hamilton was imprisoned in 1779 after purchasing pioneer scalps from Indians. The public jail gained a reputation for being haunted as a result of the hundreds of executions which took place on the property. In the jail's courtyard, both a hanging tree and a two-person pillory still stand where convicts were executed for their crimes. Tour guides and visitors frequently report hearing banging and laughing sounds coming from areas of the jail where prisoners were once chained to the wall. Paranormal investigation equipment is also very active in the public jail as cameras often develop blurry photos and K2 meters produce high readings. Today, the public jail is restored to its original 18th century facade. The prison is open to tourists 7 days a week and regularly featured in the Williamsburg ghost walks. My only problem with that is that if it's been remodeled, it's likely not going to have too many active ghosts. Trying to see. Here's a better story about it. Um, it's located at the east end of the city. The incarcerated didn't just wake up to depressing cells. With fellow occupants, including bloodthirsty pirates and traitors to the country, they were often greeted by belligerent bunkmates itching for some conflict. When Williamsburg became the capital of the colony of Virginia in 1699, city officials realized with the economic growth comes crime, and with heightened political activity, corruption. They reached out to the best building contractor in the state, Henry Carey, and authorized him to construct a strong, sweet prison two in August, I guess the 2nd of August, 1701. Initial specifications for the jail kept things small and simple, because it was not intended to house murderers, thieves, and other dangerous miscreants. At its inception, then, the public jail only has 3 rooms, 2 for inmates and 1 for the jailer. But officials realized that the city's population of wrongdoers was larger than they'd estimated. By a 30 by 20-foot building simply could not support all the runaway slaves, thieves, Tories, and spies that had been sentenced to be put behind bars. An exercise yard was therefore added in 1703, a debtor's prison in 1711, and then separate brick dwelling for the jailer in 1722. Unfortunately, despite all these additions, the public jail failed to live up to its strong and sweet expectations. The food was beyond terrible, soggy peas and overly salted beef, for instance. The cells were freezing, many inmates shivered to death, and the cleaning staff left much to be desired. Jail fever, or typhus, plagued prisoners and jailers alike. One could argue that being placed in such an inhumane environment is befitting punishment for evil pirates, especially if they served under the infamous Blackbeard. So, let's talk about Blackbeard. We're going to talk very little about Blackbeard. I might do a whole episode on him, but we're just going to talk about it because he never came to Williamsburg. He never came to Virginia, but something did. Before Edward Teach and earned the title of Blackbeard, a reputation for terrorizing the seas, he was just a humble sailor. But things changed once he joined Benjamin Hornigold's flying gang of pirates. He quickly learned the ways of the corsair and became one of the most feared pirates to roam colonial coastlines. So when Blackbeard sailed the Queen Anne's Revenge to the Carolinas, Virginia Governor Alexander Spotswood was more than ready. He ordered Lieutenant Robert Maynard to engage and capture Blackbeard and his crew, but the pirate captain was unfortunately killed during the bloody hand-to-hand conflict that ensued. Some say the governor had a pipe fixed with Blackbeard's skull displayed prominently on the banks of the Hampton River to scare off other freeboaters and prevent them from landing. I will say we do have a place in Hampton called Blackbeard's Point. Again, there's no proof, but that is the rumor for Blackbeard's Point. As for Blackbeard's 15 henchmen who survived the struggle, they were taken to Williamsburg to stand trial. They were held in they were held in the 1704 public jail on Nicholson Street, just north of the Capitol. At least some faced an admiralty court on March 12th when, according to the most cited source, one was acquitted, one pardoned, and the rest sentenced to hang. Another one of the Another one of the jail's most famous occupants was Governor Henry Hamilton. Hamilton's ability to forge friendships with Indian chiefs had earned him two nicknames, which he detested: the scalp taker and the hair buyer general. There were rumors of Hamilton purchasing the scalps of settlers from Native American raid parties, so he was captured by Colonel George Rogers Clark in 1779 to face these allegations. As he awaited trial, the poor governor discovered that even political prominence does not exempt one from brutal treatment at the public jail. He was barred from pen and paper, shackled in a tiny cell with six other criminals, and forced to eat disgusting prison food. So again, um there's very little reports of hauntings here. I mean, there's like, the usual screams and bangs and things like that, but um the jail itself, I'll tell you right now, it's creepy. I do not like going down there at night. It's just got a very weird, eerie vibe to it, and I don't like going down there at night. There's been a couple of times where like everything in my body said, "Hey, don't go down there. Do not walk down there." And I'm one to listen to my feelings and my body, so I did not walk down there. But finally, let's go right back up the street to one of the most haunted houses in Colonial Williamsburg, the Peyton Randolph House. This is one of the this is one of the oldest original houses. They didn't do much to this house. I think they worked some inside, but they did not do much to this house. Um, this is one of the most haunted houses in Colonial Williamsburg. It has also been said uh, to be the most haunted house on the East Coast. At one point, it was saying that it was the most haunted house in the U.S., but I'm pretty sure either the Winchester House in San Francisco or the Lalaurie Mansion down in New Orleans uh, takes the cake and takes the prize on those. But the Peyton Randolph House, let's get to the history. There it is. The original structure was built in 1715 by William Robertson. This house became the property of the Randolph family when Sir John Randolph bought it in 1721 and moved his family there. His wife Susanna and their three sons, Beverly, Peyton, and John, Sir John Randolph was the only colonial citizen from Virginia who was knighted by the English king. He was a wealthy man and well respected. Besides making improvements to his home, Sir John also bought the land next to his house and built another home destined to be the East Wing. When he died in 1737, his wife Susanna took care of the house until middle son Peyton became 24 years old. As the new homeowner, Peyton Randolph did some remodeling of his family's new home. He built an elaborate center section connecting all the rooms, forming the current L shape. That includes the two earlier main houses. Interestingly, the east wing is not connected to the L structure, providing a private place for his mother, Susanna, to live out her days. He and his wife Elizabeth had no surviving children. Sir John would have been proud of his sons, Peyton and John, who both served as public servants. Peyton Randolph was elected Speaker of the House of Burgesses, and his young brother John, being a brilliant lawyer, succeeded him as the colony's Attorney General. During the Revolutionary War, Peyton joined the rebellion movement, while John, being a staunch loyalist to England, went to England with his wife and daughters. John's son stayed to fight with the rebels. Peyton, a natural leader, wound up being the first president of the First and Second Continental Congresses, playing an important role up, up to the outbreak of war with Great Britain. His home became a place to meet for other revolutionary politicians like George Wythe and his cousin Thomas Jefferson. Alas, in 1775, Peyton Randolph died of a stroke while serving, but was taken home to be buried next to his father under William and Mary's Wren Chapel. Brother John eventually joined them there in 1784. Elizabeth held the fort and stayed in the family home until her death in 1782. In 1781, the Peyton Randolph House became the headquarters for the French troops, under the command of French General Jean-Baptiste Donatien de Vimier, until American and French forces joined together to surround Yorktown. I am glad that Elizabeth could live in the East Wing away from the noise. I don't know who said that, but it's just in the article. Excuse me. In 1782, the Peyton Randolph House was auctioned off, and the winner was Joseph Hornsby, who moved in with the family during 1783. In the early 19th century, the Peachy family bought the property. Mary Monroe Peachy was the matriarch of the family. In 1824, French General Lafayette stayed for 2 nights, which was a highlight for the Peachy family. French General Lafayette had a few paranormal experiences which he found to be unsettling. During the Civil War, the Peyton Randolph House became a hospital for wounded Confederate soldiers after the Battle of Williamsburg in 1862. During the late 1800s, the East Wing needed to be torn down, and in 1919, the Wilson Ball family began to rent the house, winding up buying it outright in the early 1920s. The property was divided into smaller lots, and the two 1920s style homes were built, each having a basement. In 1938, Colonial Williamsburg started the long process of buying the whole property by buying one of the main historical structures. By the 1960s, the Peyton Randolph structures and property were all owned by Colonial Williamsburg. Both of the 1920s homes were torn down. The East Wing was reconstructed as it was originally built by Sir John, becoming a rental. It is good to have. Colonial Williamsburg did two early restorations in 1939 and 1940 and 1967 to 1968. Visitors can walk through. Okay, that's just that kind of stuff. Paranormal activity. Let's switch to a different view of it. Boom. Paranormal activity has been reported since 1784. The Peyton Randolph House is considered to be the most haunted structure not only in Williamsburg but on the East Coast. It is a bad idea to disturb or destroy graves, and this act of disrespect can cause confused spirits to become active in the world. An Indian graveyard was destroyed when National Parkway Tunnel was constructed near the Peyton Randolph House in 1940. Historic homes that are restored or even rebuilt to their former glory, including the original and or reconstructed furnishings, can draw their attached spirits into being active once again. People who suffer huge loss and tragedy sometimes can't let go of their pain and stay in the world, letting the living know in some way of their pain or distract themselves by interacting with the living. Disease, illnesses, and an accident caused by the deaths of several Peachy children. Tragedies that their mother, Mrs. Peachy, could never let go of and find peace in the world. Throughout the Peyton Randolph House's long history, 30 people of all ages have died in the house due to a variety of causes: accidents, suicides, murders, war, and mysterious natural illnesses. Sometimes the spirit of the deceased and the folks left behind are restless. People who kill themselves often find that they are still unhappy, distressed, and full of sorrow or rage. Some are struck in this world by emotions that were trying to flee. They were trying to flee and find some relief by seeking the living for company, amusement, or chuckles. A disturbed uncle of the Peachy family killed himself in the drawing room of the Peyton Randolph mansion. Another disturbed person killed himself or herself in the basement at some time in the house's history. People who are suddenly stopped from completing their goals through disease or accident or war sometimes stay where they felt support for their goals and may keep trying to reach their desires. A young orphan soldier came and stayed with the Peachy family while he studied at the College of William and Mary. This young soldier caught tuberculosis and suffered a long, agonizing death. Peyton Randolph suddenly died when he wasn't ready to go just yet. And as the Peyton Randolph house was used as a Civil War hospital, some soldiers may have died there. Perhaps they don't want to leave just yet either. So we have to go to another one. Sorry, like I said, this was not easy to look up. Um, okay. The main section of the home still contains some of the original walnut paneling, brass hinges, and a floor made of ancient edge cut pine. On a tour through Colonial Williamsburg, one can see the attention to detail of the home's interior and some of the older aspects of the house on the second floor, where the Randolph family slept. Peyton Randolph was an established politician later in life. Okay, we don't need all that. Okay. In 1824, Lafayette returned to Williamsburg, where he had spent some time during the Revolutionary War. During his tour through the U.S., he stayed at the Peyton Randolph House in Williamsburg, and he wrote, I considered myself very fortunate to lodge in the home of a great man, Peyton Randolph. Upon my arrival, as I entered through the foyer, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It nudged me as if intending to keep me from entering. I quickly turned but found no one there. The nights were not restful as the sound of voices kept me awake for most of my stay. When the building served as a lodging house, as recently as the late 60s, guests would rush out in the middle of the night claiming to have been physically and violently shook, their limbs tugged on, or to have seen apparitions over their bed. An interview from the book by Jackie Bernard, The Hauntings of Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown, recounts one guest's experience. I was resting comfortable when awakened by the peculiar feeling that someone was tugging on my arm. Naturally, I assumed I was dreaming, so I rolled over and went back to sleep. A short while later, I was being shaken violently. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see that I was completely alone. I darted out of bed and ran as fast as I could. I didn't even go back to collect the things I left behind. When the Peachy family occupied the home in the 19th century, one of the boys was climbing a large tree in the backyard when a branch broke and he fell to his death. A young girl living on the second floor fell out of her window to her death. A Confederate veteran attending the College of William and Mary suddenly and mysteriously fell ill and died in the house. Later in the 18th century, two men staying at the house entered into a heated argument and shot and killed each other. One of the more popular and most recent stories is that of a Colonial Williams security guard who became trapped in the basement of the house. After entering through the shutter doors behind the house, as he was making his exit, he heard a large and terrifying growl and felt something grab his legs as if holding his feet firmly down. He was stopped in his tracks and unable to move his legs. Then suddenly the shutter doors slammed shut and his flashlight turned off. The basement of the home is also known for its disembodied voices, malevolent entities of apparitions, and the feeling of being watched. The Peyton Randolph house was also the focus of a story on unsolved mysteries back in the 80s or 90s. I couldn't find which episode it was on, but it was on an episode uh, of the um, but it was on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. And I've been to the house. I've seen the house. It is friggin' terrifying. It is. I have pictures, and in the pictures you can see something on the stairs. I looked around. I tried to find out if something was around. Like it was like the because I took a picture from the outside inside. I was trying to see if it was a like the shadows from the trees or the images from the trees or something like reflecting off the glass, but it wasn't. It was just terrifying. Like the feeling, the vibe is just it's scary. Um and it's creepy. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out on that. If you go and you're going to do a ghost tour, do the Peyton Randolph house. But you can also, if you're interested in the security guard's story, he is on YouTube. I was going to download the video and put it on here, but it's a 10-minute video um, of him talking about what happened, and I was getting goosebumps. So if you're interested, please, please go look at that. Go look for that video. Um, just Google Peyton Randolph House haunting, and that video will come up. So in closing, it's there's more. This is not all the stories. This is not everything from Colonial Williamsburg. It's just very, very hard to get full stories because everybody wants you to, I don't have that history and that experience in um research and things like that. Everything I do off websites or books or my own personal experience. And a lot of what today was my personal experience in Colonial Williamsburg. It is a very unique place. There's a unique vibe when you walk around, especially at night. Because about 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, most of the tourists have left. Most of the folks who are down eating dinner in Merchant Square, all the shops have closed, and it's just you walking around by yourself. It's a very unique um, freeing, very freeing experience that I suggest everybody gets a chance to experience. Um, but if you haven't made travel plans for this year, consider going to Colonial Williamsburg. Besides being a very healthy dose of colonialism, of colonial history, the founding of America, and everything. The thing about Colonial Williamsburg is it's in what we used to call it the historic triangle. Because you have Colonial Williamsburg, you have Jamestown and Yorktown, all within like 5 miles of each other, and it forms a triangle. And so you basically have the founding of America in Jamestown, the first colony. You have the first capital of America in Williamsburg, and you have the end of the Revolutionary War in Yorktown, all within a triangle, all within 5 miles of each other. Um, if you go to Yorktown, you can experience Cornwallis's cave, um, and experience the haunting there and everything. There's each place has its own hauntings, but definitely keep in mind, guys. Let me know how you enjoyed the first episode of Shivers. Hopefully, the next one will have a little more. It's going to be a little more, little easier to research. The next episode because I've already done a little bit. I think if I'm going to do what I think I'm going to do, I believe our second episode is going to be a true crime episode, um, of a local of something that happened locally here in Dayton. Um, I'm not 100% sure on it yet. Just keep a check on the Facebook page. Keep a check on Twitter. I do most of my stuff on Twitter, for Bloody Binge, so definitely keep an eye out for that. But guys, yeah, let me know how you enjoyed the first episode of Shivers, and see if we should keep going or if I should just cut it quits. Um, I am your host, Steven. You can find me on Facebook at STEPHAN Henderson. You can find me everywhere, of course, at the Bloody Binge Movie Podcast on Facebook groups. You can find this Bloody Binge Movie Podcast on YouTube and on Twitch or X. You can also download any of these episodes now on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts, or where most places that carry podcasts. Always under the Bloody Binge Movie Podcast. Join us next week. We will be here for the Bloody Binge returns next week. Next week we're going to back to some 80s cult comedy greatness. One of my favorite movies, Moving Violation, starring John Murray, Bill Murray's younger brother, and Jennifer Tilly, a very young and cute Jennifer Tilly, as they create havoc on the roads of Los Angeles. So, guys, keep it spooky, and definitely let me know of some things you want me to cover on Shivers, or movies you want to see me cover on Bloody Binge. I'm always up for suggestions. But guys, we're gonna go ahead and sign off. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Have a great weekend, guys.